Play on music. The bass comes in. It's so good. I feel like I need to do this.
Very nice.
And then the other way. Oh my gosh, that song gets me every time.
It's very good. It
Okay,
has a beat.
while we're talking about the song, shout out to my friend Julius Wilder, who wrote and produced this song for CultureCast. Happy New Year
Yes.
2024.
Oh my God.
Happy CultureCast Day to y'all who are sitting here in the LinkedIn Live land and or Twitter and or YouTube, participating live on all of this. And I just have to say, welcome, 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 Christopher Bylone, the global head of belonging at Krispy Kreme.
Yes. Thank you, Marisa.
I mean, that's just so much and so good.
Yeah.
When I say that, like the global head of belonging, that's one thing. Like, who wouldn't want to be in that role? And who wouldn't want to be at a company that has a belonging leader like Krispy Kreme,
Yeah. Well,
right?
yeah. When I joined Krispy Kreme, I joined for a couple of reasons. One, wanted to be in a consumer-facing brand.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd never really thought about it as the iconic brand until I was joining onboarding. But then when we really were talking about what my role was going to be and how we were going to position this within the organization, when I started, it was the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Oh, wow. That's a mouthful and
It
very corporate. I mean,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
So we had some really like with in the first like days that I was there, the conversation was, what are we trying to solve for?
Right.
And we said we were trying to solve for belonging. So I said, well, why don't we lead with belonging?
Love it.
And then the question was asked, can we stop at belonging? And I took a pause for a second and said, well, I think for my title,
Yeah.
right, to kind of keep it short and sweet and to the point, head of belonging, cool. However, because this is a new thing for Krispy Kreme, right?
Yeah.
I'm the first person in the chair.
Yep.
Which is a privilege and an honor of itself.
Amazing.
We have a lot of work to do in building inclusive leaders, diversifying our organization,
That's right.
making sure that we have equitable policies and practices, and also making sure that we have an accessible organization for all people. So I didn't want to lose those things.
Right.
So even when you kind of see in my email or on my LinkedIn profile, it'll say Global Head of Belonging, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, because I don't want people to lose sight of all
Yeah.
the other things we need to do that makes belonging.
I hear you. I'm gonna make a comment on that, but before that, I'm gonna do a couple shout outs
Yes.
and then we'll just jump right into that briefly before we really talk about who is Christopher. So I think some of you may have seen this background before. We are coming to you live from Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee at the Hideout. And actually, this is one of the rooms. It's a full-on recording studio. In fact, there's a band recording
Yeah.
right now in the other recording studio. This was Waylon Jennings' home. So the house that we walked into and we walked downstairs,
Yes.
he built out this whole recording
Wow.
studio. So we are sitting here in a historic area
Mm.
and specifically a studio. That was Waylon Jennings. So a big nod to our friends in the Ville in Nashville. So the Hideout, thank you so much for having us. Secondly, I know that on LinkedIn Live specifically, Look, you can see it now. There's some comments that are popping up. So if you see us looking at you and at each other, it's because we want to make sure we're paying attention to what y'all are saying. Look at me with my Nashville accent. Check that out. What y'all are saying on what Christopher is saying. And so while even with my glasses, I can't see who's saying it, we'll at least try and look at the comments
Yes.
and address them as we can. If not, we so appreciate all the goodness and love that you are sending in the comments. So thank you. Please get in there. It's so funny that afterwards when people say, well, I was there live. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say something like comment? We love seeing that. And so that's another shout out. And then third, again, reminding everyone that if you're just joining us now, we've got Christopher Bylone, the global head of belonging for Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here. And as I said this when we thought we were going to do this at the end of last year, but I think it's actually even a better way to start off the new year. Who wouldn't want to start off the year with a leader who is representing a brand that's all about touching and enhancing the lives of people through the joy that is Krispy Kreme?
Yeah, and I think, before we even jump into the bigger conversation, I think we also need to give a shout out to our Krispy Kremers who are working in our shops.
Oh my goodness.
We were there this morning.
That's right.
Seeing them in action, which was really good. So our good friend Glenn, the GM at our Thompson Lane store.
Glenn, who's been there for 5 years.
Yeah, and then we have Rustin, who is the district manager, who is been here 23 years.
Yeah, I think in April he'll be coming up to 23 years.
And there were many employees there who are, double digit folks. Which...
Actually, there were a couple of they were packing donuts right now. So I think what most people don't know about, it's not just a donut shop. This is not your father's Krispy Kreme.
No.
This is it's a direct deliver fresh daily.
Yes.
To all these different points of access.
Yes.
And what I learned from Glenn today is that one shop that we were at on Thompson Lane, so thank you for hosting us this morning, delivers to 60 different points of access.
Yeah, 2,000 dozen donuts a day.
I mean,
minimal, right? And some days they're up to 3,000
That's
dozen.
So amazing.
That's just impressive. I mean, to think about all those donuts need to be touched by hand by a Krispy Kremer, decorated, boxed up, and shipped out. All of those individuals are vital to the success of our organization.
You're right.
One of the reasons why my role's created is to make sure that each one of those people not feel that they belong, but know that they belong.
I agree. And actually, you're right. I mean, the whole Krispy Kremer crew, shout out to all of you as well. It was all going on. I mean, it was hot now, right? The donuts were coming off the line and there were customers in there getting it hot now. And then I saw them decorating the Biscoff donuts.
Yeah.
If you all don't know, the limited time offer that's happening right now is Biscoff.
Yes.
A little crazy.
Oh my God.
Right? So we saw them doing that and we saw them in the back packing the donuts. So for those of you who go, Marisa, there's not enough Krispy Kremes in the world. I have to drive, or I might go to my Walmart or to my Kroger to find Krispy Kreme. Speaking of that, we were traveling through the Las Vegas terminal yesterday, my husband and I, Michael. Mm-hmm. And of course, we popped into one of those kiosks and picked up our 3 OG donuts and 1 chocolate ring at 6:45 a.m. because that's what you need.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So let's jump into you. Before we get into all this goodness, I know we told everyone we were going to talk about this groundbreaking B-Suite responsibility report that I know you and Dean and others have had a hand in creating at Krispy Kreme. I always loved talking about who you are. So before we get into, which we already know, you are the global head of belonging. But who's Christopher? Tell us about where you grew up and and I know you'd mentioned to me, hey, here are some topics that might come up. Let's talk about you and who you are and why you are, right? What led you to this pathway of becoming this guru in belonging, diversity, equity, and access?
Yeah, everybody has a very interesting life journey, right? And mine is probably no different in the interest. I started working on my family farm
Oh,
in
wow.
South Jersey.
I
Yeah.
did not know that.
I have my bachelor's degree in agriculture science from Rutgers.
Okay, I can actually see the connection, but I'm gonna listen. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I grew up uh if you have ever received Jersey produce and it says Jersey Fresh,
Yeah.
my grandfather created that.
No way.
Yes, Charles Bylone. So, have a long history and connection to agriculture. And I was the only grandson who was interested in taking it over. My dad became the sole proprietor of the farm. And that's what I thought my life's journey was going to be,
Oh, wow.
right?
Yeah.
When you're in a family business, you don't necessarily completely understand the pressure that's on you to continue it.
Sure.
And at the time, I didn't necessarily feel the pressure. It was something I loved. You know, uh, my husband and I keep talking about buying a farm again
Amazing.
because that's just who we are as individuals. And but then when I was in college, the farm went out of business. So this was the early 2000s,
Okay.
and there was just a lot of natural disasters that happened in New Jersey, and a lot of farmers just could not recover. And we were one of those. And so the farm went out of business. I thought I was going to go to be one of those agricultural agents that worked for the land grant university, and my goal was to save the family farmer. While I was in what, but what I realized was I also kind of came into my own. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I had come out as a gay man, a few years before that. But what I realized was being an out gay man in agriculture wasn't going to work.
Really?
It was
Say more
just
about that.
so in my so end of my so I did college in 6 years. When I was in my fifth year, we had one of our senior projects, and the class was to go out to a farm. They give you a problem. You come back to the classroom, and you
Yeah.
have to figure out and give them a solution. And when we would go and present to the farmer, I would be the one that would do the presenting because I was, good with PowerPoint and public speaking. But when it came time for Q&A, I was never asked a question.
That's
All my
interesting.
other classmates were. And what I
Not
realized
cool.
was that I was rather flamboyant in college.
Okay.
The flame was on a little too high.
Okay.
And so, I just realized that, I asked myself, do I really want to be a martyr
Yeah.
in this industry? And a dean of mine said, Christopher, have you ever thought about going into student affairs and student activities? And I was like, well, that's a really interesting concept. And so that was my first career
Yeah.
shift, right? I left the agriculture world and said, okay, I'm going to dive in completely into student affairs, went and got my master's at Eastern Michigan University. Um, and worked for a couple years in higher ed, and then um, the economy crash in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
I was working at small private colleges, and the endowment started to dry up, and positions started to go away, and there were layoffs, and I just happened to be part of in that round. Interestingly enough, if you look at friends of mine who graduated between 2007 and 2009 from higher ed programs, 75% of us are no longer in the field
Okay.
because just of the timing of the when there was just a
Yeah.
downturn, there was just no jobs, so we just all left.
Yeah.
And so that's when I made the transition into HR. And I always had a knack for the underdog, right? Making
Right.
sure that we had equitable.
Why is that?
Well, I think one being a gay man,
Okay.
seeing that. My mom's a lesbian,
Okay.
so seeing, grew up in the Catholic Church.
Oh boy.
Um,
Right.
let's just keep adding it on here. And so also the other thing, when I was very young, around 7 or 8, on the farm, um, the workers that came to work on the farm came from Puerto Rico,
Okay.
and they lived in a house called the labor camp. And every Friday, they would, in the evening, it would be time for us to bring them their paycheck,
Yeah.
and they would be making a big meal. And they would always invite us in
Amazing.
to dinner.
Yes.
And I can remember being this 7-year old who didn't really understand what was going on, because it was always like, well, those are the workers and we live over here. And there was a divide. And I could remember one day I refused to go in.
Oh, you didn't want to go into the meal?
I didn't want to go in.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, well, we eat over there, right?
Interesting.
And I can remember my grandfather saying to us, the reason why we can eat is because of them. So you are going to have a meal with them, and they are not beneath you. And so to me, that was my first awakening to being anti-racist.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And
Right?
by the way, I feel like every leader that I've had the chance to connect with on a culture cast, there is an epiphany that occurs between the ages of 6 and 10, that stays with them for the rest of their life. And so I'm excited, first of all, for Grandpa Bylone. Get it? I mean, he's like, no, get in there. That's the reason why we are able to live, is because they make that happen.
Yes.
Um, and then, two, for you to acknowledge that, at 7 and carry that with you.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
to me, it was, we're all here for the same reason.
that's right.
We may look very different from each other. We may have completely different backgrounds. We may have completely different roles in the organization,
Mm-hmm.
but we're all on the same team. And if I think back to the root of why I do this work, it goes back to that.
I love that.
Right? In high school, I was the one who was advocating for, the prices of the prom tickets to, how they would say if you buy 2 tickets, if you're a couple,
Yeah.
you get a reduced rate. And I could remember these 2 guys who were definitely not in a romantic relationship, but they said, well, we're buying tickets together. We're going as friends. And the high school said, well, you don't get the reduced rate. You're not a couple. And I said, well, what difference does it make?
It doesn't.
Right?
Right.
They're buying the tickets together.
Yeah,
What's the difference? Why do you get to say who was a couple and who was
that's
not?
right.
So those little things, right, that all add up to going back to how are we creating an equitable society,
I love that.
is why I do this work.
Yep. I think so. I think, I had the chance to be part of a focus group. I want to say this was like 8 years ago with Jim Collins. He wrote Good to Great. And it was a focus group, I think, for something he was researching. And the thesis was that while we all might make pivots and career changes, that it's almost like reinventing yourself every time. But at your core, you're always going to be that. And so what I mean by that is I feel very similar to you. I think about my entire life, I have been observing human beings for as far back as I can remember. A little different story. My mom and dad were immigrants. I'm always proud to say I'm first generation American. We spoke 3 languages inside the house. And then when it was time to go to school, we'll speak English only, because my parents wanted to make sure we were treated fairly, and consistently, equitably as the other students. And just even having that and watching my parents who were immigrants, and then my mom like bringing her family in from the Philippines, and then they had to find their way. I carry that with me. The same thing in high school, was always an advocate for making this the best experience possible for the student body, which is why my parents said get good grades. And the only way I did that was student body, right? So student government, track and cross country, every club I joined, I was a cheerleader, etc. But fast forward, I think about all the things around people and the experience for people. And to your point, like this feeling of the underdog and acknowledging that, it's personal to me. It's like my family story. And that when relatives would come over here, and although they were professionals, the only companies that would hire them were fast food and retail companies, and they
Yeah.
had to make their way up. But I do want to acknowledge this whole roots, no pun intended, if I think about your background growing up on a farm and then studying agriculture, and the fact that, and thank you for sharing some personal insights around why you are such a champion for belonging and equity and access and diversity is it's not a surprise to me. So you think about the word cultivate, right? And you
Hmm.
think about that, the organic nature of farming. And you think about people as well. And what do you do to cultivate, them so that they can thrive in the world? It's not only the plants and the animals that are on the farm. And, you shared the story about the laborers, that Puerto Ricans living on the farm. Like, what do you do to cultivate them so that they can be their best and that they can
Yep.
thrive? So, not at all a surprise to me as you share that story on, how you ended up doing what you're doing now and being a champion for um, belonging. And actually, and we'll jump into Krispy Kreme, kind of the intro when we were talking about your title. I love that you actually landed with global head of belonging, right? And the rest, diversity, equity, inclusion, access, etc. I think you nailed the problem to solve. And I'm going to nerd for a minute. Well, I'm going to nerd all the time, nerd out. But I always believe that once you get everyone aligned on the problem, right? And the problem here is, how do we create belonging? What does belonging look like? All the other things are actually outcomes or solutions. Once people all get aligned on that, then you will get a lot of traction on what it is that you're trying to do, right? Because people will buy into that.
Yeah, there's we know that there's a debate right now about what diversity, equity, inclusion should be in our society, right? There's laws being passed banning it.
Yes, right.
People are talking about, should we be doing this? The past week, there's been several posts on LinkedIn from different DE&I leaders talking about, oh, I don't want to use the term DEI anymore,
Yeah.
right? I'm just going to say diversity, equity, inclusion. And there's a really great author and practitioner at the moment, Lily Zhang. They wrote the book Deconstructing DEI
Mm-hmm.
and Reconstructing DEI,
Yeah.
which I'm currently working on that workbook. Definitely a lifelong learner. But they just posted today about how they want to make sure that practitioners are not shying away from the term DEI,
Right.
because we don't shy away from it because you're afraid, right? Lean into it, right?
Absolutely.
DE&I is not the thing that we do; it's the outcome,
That's
right?
right.
That's
That's
what, and
right.
and that's one of the reasons why I talk about belonging the way I do, is because belonging is the product of what I consider the formula of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. It's creating inclusive leaders, it's diversifying the organizations, it's equitable policies and practices, and making sure that we have organizations that is accessible for all people, no matter where they are on the continuum of human experiences.
I love that. And actually, you have created a formula.
I did.
You actually sign off with that,
I do.
right?
A lot, yes.
So, can you just remind people? You just walk through the formula quickly, but let's put quotes around it so people can remember this. Yeah.
So belonging equals inclusion times diversity plus equity to the power of accessibility.
Oh my gosh. That's the math major in me looking at all the symbols. I love that. And actually, your comment too on, look, it's been a conversation. It feels like it always becomes fresh at the start of every year. So, as we all know, and I know there's many of you who are on listening to this call who are chief diversity officers at other global companies, and in 2020, all of a sudden it was, on fleek, right?
Yes,
Is it on fleek to say on fleek? I don't know. Anyway, it was a trend.
it was a trend.
And CEOs were coming back from the business roundtable and they all had to hire or appoint a chief diversity officer reporting in directly to them, right?
Yep.
And it was obvious. And it was like, let's hire someone or appoint someone who's also diverse into that role. And then we lived through that with the global pandemic and civil and social unrest. And then, we were coming out of the fog at the end of 2021, 2022. And then we started to hear a lot of noise, right? Beginning of 2023. Like, can't believe it's 2024.
I know.
But it feels like at the start of every year, there's this big debate on what is DE&I and should it even exist. And companies that have invested in it, they're like, well, we no longer, now it's the year of efficiency, which was last year for one company specifically, and then everyone followed suit, especially in tech, and the resources they're cutting. But I think about, to your point, it's an outcome. And, you and I were at the same Inclusion 23 conference for SHRM back in October. I believe in this and that I get why some people are saying, I'm never going to say DE&I again. I think it's an outcome. I think if companies really think about it from a strategy standpoint, right, and you go back to your company purpose and your values, and if it's rooted there, and if the principles of belonging / your formula are rooted in the actual strategy of the company, those outcomes will actually come, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And why are you doing this work?
Right.
Right? Why do you have these roles? Is it performative? Or are you actually trying to create substantive change? And I think 2022 was the year where organizations were showing their true colors on if they were going to be that they were doing performative DEI work,
Right.
or were they making substantive change, right? I made a career shift.
Okay.
I changed organizations. I joined Krispy Kreme in May of 2023. I left my former employer in October of 2022. It was the right time for me to go.
Sure.
We were all experiencing burnout from the pandemic and other things. And so just thankfully I was in a position, my husband and I, to be privileged enough to take a career break.
As you should. Right.
And then, kind of just asking myself, what did I want to be doing? Right? I knew I still wanted to do this work, but where did I want to do it and how did I want to do it? And I was very confident and with myself to say, I'm not going to do performative DEI work. And if I felt I was interviewing for a role that I was going to go do performative DEI work, I would remove myself as a candidate.
Yeah.
And I did. There were multiple times when it was a really good opportunity financially.
Sure.
Right? Could probably be a really awesome named company to go work for. But the work that they were asking to be done was not what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's check the box.
It's check the
window
box.
dressing. Right.
And so coming, very, very, very upfront with Terry in the process, who's the chief people officer at Krispy Kreme.
Who's amazing.
Who is amazing.
I love her.
Love her. Not just saying it because we're on a podcast.
Yeah, well,
but
I actually love everyone at Krispy Kreme.
We
Everyone's
do.
amazing. Anyway.
But very, very upfront to say, hire me because you want somebody who's going to come in to change your policy, your practice, and your process around diversity, equity, inclusion. Don't hire me just to run your ERGs or to put on International Women's Day or Black History Month or Pride. Yes, we need to do all those things, right? There is some performative work that needs to be done in this space, but that's kind of an outcome of the work of policy, practice, and process.
That's amazing. And by the way, ERGs, for those of you who are not in the diversity work, is an acronym for employee resource groups.
Yes.
And employees come together who have a common interest and passion for that. And I think the beauty of employee resource groups is that they can serve as, I'd say, a good focus group for business initiatives.
Yes.
Right? If the business is trying to grow in a certain area, go to these different employee resource groups to get their feedback and perspective on what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and at Krispy Kreme, we call them assorted originals.
I love that. Again with the Krispy Kremes. There's so many darn acronyms, but let's dig into this responsibility report.
Yes.
All right, which is also a strategy for the company.
Yes.
But it's this B-suite responsibility report. And again, I'm using the word love a lot because I just tend to. But what I love about Krispy Kreme is that look, I know Josh is now the new CEO.
Yes.
Mike was just the outgoing CEO. And I love that he had love letters, right,
Yes.
to the employees. And so you think about this B Suite report, how it is about loving our Krispy Kremers, loving our community, loving our planet. Can you just say more about like what is this report for those who are not familiar with it and why is it? Like why was it created? And I know that Bodane is out there, who I had
Yes.
the chance to actually see his amazing presentation on the B Suite Responsibility Report. But for everyone else who's like tuning in, who are just dying to know,
Yeah.
say more about it.
Also just need to give out a shout out to Eloise Hale
Oh,
as well.
Eloise as well.
So
Yes.
if you really think about Bo, Eloise, and I are really the kind of the three legs to the ESG uh, stool
Yeah.
at Krispy Kreme. So um, would Bo was our leader, right? If you
Yeah.
think about it, and but we all played a pivotal part. I think for us, this is the um, putting the flag in the sand, right?
Got
We're
it.
saying, you know, this is what we are committing ourselves to, and this is the type of organization we want people to know ourselves for. Um, you know, Bo, Eloise, and I were all hired in 2023.
Oh, wow. That's right.
So this is a lot of new space for Krispy Kreme
Okay.
in a strategic way, right? There have been people who have been working on this for years, and in other markets, thinking about the great work that was being done in the UK around greenhouse gas emissions and Mexico working on other sustainability issues, waste initiatives in Australia and the UK. So this has been being done in pockets, but now what we have done is we're bringing it together
Yeah.
in a strategic way that we're all moving together,
Makes total
right?
sense.
It's not several buses driving down different
Yeah.
highways, right? We're all trying to get on the same bus, right? And move us together down a path so that we're all consistent in the approach, making sure that we all have one goal, where are the synergies, but also giving the markets the freedom
Yeah.
for them to do what feels right for them. But for us, this B Suite responsibility report is our flag in this. We're drawing the line in the sand and saying this is who we are as a company, and this is where we intend to go.
I love it. Yeah. And so the three parts to it. And by the way, ESG, another terminology, which is an acronym for environmental, social, and governance,
Yes.
also became a huge trend. I think back in 2020, having been a chief people officer at publicly traded companies, a lot of investors, especially when they're
Yes.
buying stock in your company, really want to see that you're tuned in to being a responsible organization environmentally, right? Socially. And then there's the whole governance side, which is as a publicly traded company, making sure that you're,
Being
that you
ethical and
being
you're
ethical.
paying our
Exactly.
taxes and
Right.
so we at Krispy Kreme, it's loving our people, loving our communities, and loving our planet, right? Those are really the three big pillars of our B Suite strategy that we have.
And so ideas around just one idea or two that people, if they were to pick up the report, which you can, just go onto the krispykreme.com website, hit on investors, and then under there you can see the PDF, download the report. But what's an example of like a commitment to loving our people in the, in as people will read about it?
So I think one of the commitments that I'm actually really proud about is that we talk about that um, we we only want to hire our general managers internally,
That's amazing.
right?
Yeah.
So we have a goal that we need to have a 100% internal promotion into our general managers who run our shops. But we also want to make sure that they're diverse,
Yeah.
right? We need to make sure so it's 50% women at GM level and above, right? And so that we have work to do,
That's huge.
right? But
Yeah.
that's a commitment that we have put out there. And so now we're going to be able to track that, right? To report on that and hold ourselves accountable. And if things don't go the way that we hope, then we're going to have to do some soul searching and say, what do we need to do differently to get to reach that goal, but I think we have the right plan, the right people in place, the right commitments. We've mentioned a couple times that we've had a change in a CEO,
Yeah.
and Josh has stepped in. Um, One of the things that I found very powerful over the last couple months. So before I knew that this change was coming, um, because of course I found out when everybody else did. Um, uh,
As you should
as
with a
we should,
CEO succession, right?
right? But I say that in jest. Um, I was having conversations with Terry and Josh about how we were going to build the belonging program.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to see happen was evolve the DE&I council that we had at Krispy Kreme and evolve it to a global belonging steering committee.
Love it.
And one of the things I asked for was that Josh would be the co-chair with me. I made that request when he was sitting as the COO, right,
Yeah.
or Chief Operating Officer. Now, we know that these plans for CEO succession happens a lot longer
Oh,
than,
yeah.
right?
There's at least a year plus timeline,
Right.
right? Yeah.
So, when the change happened, when the change was announced that Josh was going to be stepping into the CEO role, I went to Terry and said, okay, so do we need to have a conversation about who's going to chair the global belonging steering committee? And she said, no. And I said, oh. She said, when you made the request, we knew that Josh was going to become the CEO.
Yes. Love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to take a little bit of a sat back in my seat a little bit because that was powerful to me, right? That the leaders of my organization were making decisions to ensure that the tone from the top,
Yes.
right, was going to be set appropriately and boldly, right? So we're now going to be in the process of building out the global steering committee over this next couple months, and Josh is going to be co-chair with me, right? So the CEO is going to be co-chair of our global belonging steering committee. That's huge.
It's a big deal, and it says a lot about this culture. I think you've heard me say this. I say this all the time, that culture is a reflection of leadership.
Yes.
And so who else but the very top, right? Although Josh would hate that we're even saying that because he's
Yes.
so humble
Well,
and he's like, it's like that inverted pyramid, right? Where he is all about supporting the people. It's not about the CEO.
no.
Yeah.
But when you think about how this work needs to be done and where the responsibility lies,
Yes.
right? It comes to the CEO seat. And so for that decision to be made, spoke volumes to me and reaffirmed for me that I was in the right role at the right organization.
So excellent. And I love this idea too of gender parity
Yes.
at every level in the
Yes.
organization. And I know that in the short time that I've been associated with Krispy Kreme, that I've seen that movement happen at the leadership levels, of the organization as well. So I think that's amazing.
It is. It is. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I know.
But I think there have been some really good decisions that have been made in the recent past. And we just need to make sure that we can continue to replicate them.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not just about having the right number of women in, having 50%
Yeah.
women, but it's also making sure that we're actually paying people fairly
I
and
love that.
equitably, right? It's, and not just from a gender standpoint, but from a race ethnicity standpoint, from
Sure,
a disability
right.
standpoint, so it's about making sure that people can, be able to live.
That's right. It's pay equity at every level.
Yes.
And it is about really closing that gap between, I'm just going to say, minimum wage and living wage
Yep.
for people so that they can also live their lives. When you talk about processes, programs, and systems, and ensuring that you apply the belonging formula to it, One thing that I do love about Krispy Kreme, and it's part of how leadership has kind of led performance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is the outgoing CEO and leaders who are part of the leadership team talk to the Krispy Kremers about performance in a way where it's about goals and dreams and about love and tough love.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think that's genius.
Yeah, so for me, I think, it's the compass,
Yeah,
right? You can't have love without tough love,
that's right.
right? You can't have dreaming without getting stuff done,
Yeah,
right? And so you have to find that balance. And so there's going to be a lot of times when you're in the dream space,
yeah,
and you should be. But then there's definitely going to be times, and a lot of times, you just need to be in the get stuff done space.
yeah,
Um, so for me, I think that has been really powerful for me as I've been
yeah.
thinking about how we put our belonging program together. Is how do we set the North Star
Yep.
for where we want people to go, but then also how do we hold them accountable, right? I want to, there's that carrot and the stick analogy,
Yeah.
Love, tough love. You can look at it a couple different ways. But for me, it's about putting out the aspirational journey we want people to be on, right? We want people to be inclusive leaders.
That's right.
However, we also need to make sure that we have processes in place that if leaders choose not to be inclusive, that we can hold them accountable.
I hear you. Yeah.
However, I'm hoping that people will come along this journey willingly,
Yeah.
because it's going to make it easier for everyone. But we have to have the accountability process in
Yeah.
place as well.
I agree. And I think something as simple as goals and dreams and love and tough love, I think that is inclusivity in action. And what I mean by that is let's just apply this to um, a performance development conversation, a one on one, right, between employee and her or his manager. And they're sitting down, and if it's hopefully not just one time a year, I'm again being a nerd again, but like sitting down with your manager and the manager sitting down with you who supports you, talking about, all right, what are your goals, right? And getting alignment because we're all here to make sure the company is successful.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are you contributing to those goals for the company? And I love the whole dreaming part because it's also about what are people dreaming about, right? Whether they're dreaming about getting this done in a certain way, this goal, or they might even have a personal developmental goal.
Yep.
And when I say it's inclusivity in action, it's that a leader is just inspiring confidence in their people
Mm-hmm.
that they want to hear and see all of it,
Yeah.
right, from their people. And then I love the love and tough love. Love meaning, appreciation and acknowledgement and seeing and hearing people goes a long way,
Yes.
right? And the tough love does as well.
Yes.
I think one of the kindest things to do for people is to be clear and to be frank and truthful in feedback. And so that they know what they can be doing differently. And I think when I listen to the tough love, you got to have that too,
Yes.
so people can learn,
Well,
right?
you can't just have all yes people around you, right?
Absolutely.
You
Although
need
I just said absolutely to you.
well, you could be my yes person. Um, uh, the you need to you need a feedback loop that's going to give you honest criticism, right? And honest appreciation. Because if you're not getting if you're only getting the yay, you're doing really
Yeah,
good, but not the hey, watch out here, right? You're not going to grow.
that's right.
And so however you want to call it, love, tough love, appreciation, criticism, it's two sides of the same coin.
That's right.
And we need to be able to welcome it. But also, I think one of the things that I struggled early on, in my career, in my life, and probably people will laugh when they hear me say this, is that I actually struggled with recognition, right? With people saying you're doing really good,
Oh, you mean being accepting or receiving? Okay, got
receiving the
it.
recognition,
Receiving it, yeah.
right? I struggled with that because it was like, no, like I just want to do the work, right? And I have come to terms with that. You also have to be willing to receive the recognition of the work
Yeah,
that you have done, so that you can model the way for others.
that's right.
And that's part of being a leader, is being willing and accepting of the title.
That's
Uh,
right.
and so that took a little bit in me early on, but and so that was definitely something when I think about also why do I sit in this chair, right? I want to make sure that I'm not just making room for others at the table. I am making sure that their voice is heard at the table.
Yes. Amazing. Let's move on to just a couple quick hits on loving our community
Yes.
and loving our planet. Anything that we should highlight?
Well, I think so. Some really good work that's coming out of the UK is around the acts of joy.
Oh,
You,
say more about that. I love this actually.
right?
Yeah.
So, where we empower our associates at the cash register, that if they hear it's your birthday today, or in the conversation it sounds like you might be having the
Yeah.
greatest day, they can hit a button on the cash register and it's an act of joy, and it's the donuts are free. And it can be one donut, it could be 3 dozen donuts. It doesn't matter. We have empowered those folks to do that, and we've been seeing a lot of great feedback and people just completely appreciative of what we were doing, and so that's one of those
Yes.
loving our community pieces. Also, our fundraising arm,
Yeah.
right, raising over $40 million for different groups around the organization, around the country and the globe. I think from loving our planet, it's looking at our war on waste,
Yeah.
right? A lot of, so the UK, Australia, Mexico is doing some really good work in that space. The United States is also doing really good work, but I think there's I hate this expression that we're burning the candle at all ends, but we really
Yeah.
are, because there's so many people in the organization who are holding their own candle, right?
Yeah.
It's not just one person is holding a candle being burnt in 10 different ways. We all have our own candle that we have lit, right? And we're working on these different projects, so that we can move the organization forward. And so to me, I think, or not I think, I feel and I know that you are going to see a Krispy Kreme that's just going to constantly be able to be on the cutting edge, on the leading edge of what it means to love your people, love your communities, and love your planet.
Yeah. And it's just so simple at the same time when the strategy is about loving our people, loving our communities, loving our planet. And I know Christine, I can't read the last name, but she's loving the amazing part about the employee empowerment
Yeah.
and the community, which, and for the community, which is this Be Sweet commitment. But I was going to say, acts of joy, I'm glad that you explained that because it is heartwarming to hear about literally the acts of joy
Yes.
that the Krispy Kremers, the associates are bringing to their community every day. And I think we need more of that in the world. Again, this is not even nerding out. This is all about peace, love, and community.
Yeah.
And especially this is a wild year. It's 2024. Major elections are happening in the US and in India. There's also agita, in massively. We won't get political or religious, but we know that, right?
Yes.
People are on edge. And when there's something that you can empower an employee to really literally touch and enhance the lives of others
Yeah.
through the joy that is Krispy Kreme by
It's
being
living our brand. I mean,
right?
it's living the brand
Right.
right at the moment, right? It's and I don't. This is the first organization that I have worked for and worked with that I can truly say empowers our people to live out
Yeah,
the brand,
I agree.
right? And so that's that's powerful in itself. And when you're talking about creating a place where everybody knows that they belong, um, that's how you do it, right? You need to make sure that people. It's not just about belonging, but it's also about empowering people to. We were, in the conversation we were having with Glenn, the shop
Yes.
manager here in Nashville. Um, I don't know if you were there because I had gotten there a little earlier, but one of the things I asked him is that, like, why do you stay at Krispy
No,
Kreme?
I was there when you asked him. Yeah.
And one of the things he said was that, it's the first place that he truly feels that uh, he he can truly be the owner of his
Yeah.
business, right? One of the 12 leadership mixes principles that we have is think and act like an owner, right? And he's like, this is the first place that I actually feel like I actually can do that. And so to hear our Krispy Kremers on the front lines living our leadership mix
That's
and
right.
truly saying that it's not just words on a piece of paper, right? But it's actually living out in principle, is really impactful for me and really inspiring.
Yeah. I think it was interesting hearing every Krispy Kremer in Nashville at the Thompson Lane shop really talk about their why.
Yes.
And I mean, there's a lot of heritage too, in that many of these Krispy Kremers, and it's unusual because I've worked in a lot of different consumer facing companies where they're commuting long ways to get to their work of, their place of employment. And many of them were like, well, yeah, I just grew up down the street and I know everyone in this community. So this whole representative of the community, I think it was Anthony who I met, who was kind of serving donuts to people. And he goes, this is why I do it. I've been here now for almost 5 years. He made a complete change from his job. And he's like, I can work at Krispy Kreme. I used to come here when this place had a counter. And he said, I just love it because people love donuts and I love serving people.
Yeah.
And I know all the people because they all grew up around here, which is wild.
It is wild.
And it's hard to find that. And one thing, too, as I listen to you, and it's a reminder of like when I first actually met you in person, I knew you were joining the company. Um, and during National Donut Day
Yes, in New York.
in New York at the NASDAQ, um, the Krispy Kremers had the chance to go ring the closing bell.
Yes, that was awesome.
And so I've had that opportunity with other brands to go ring the opening or the closing bell in New York with the other leaders. But I think what was unique about the Krispy Kreme on National Donut Day bell ringing, it the Krispy Kremers encompass their family.
Yes.
So the CEO showing up with his daughter, other leaders showing up with their families, board members invited, bringing their, I mean, that's unusual,
Yes.
right? And it says a lot about, again, the love for our people, the love for our communities. Um, to experience that was actually pretty amazing too.
Yeah, that was my end of week 3.
That's right.
So yeah, it was really impressive to see that. The other thing that from that day, probably the memory that sticks with me the most, there's two actually. One is getting to stand at the sampling window for 3 hours and just giving people donuts, right? Handing out an original OG.
Oh yeah, Times Square.
In Times Square, and just seeing
Yeah.
their faces light up, right, and the smiles. And then the other memory that will always live with me is seeing my face on the jumbotron. Right, we were we taking the pictures, and I was prepared for the HR group, right? Because I knew I was in that. I did not know that they took a single shot of me, and so when they were showing the pictures, I saw the HR one. I took a shot of it and sent it to my mom, and my mom said, "Oh, that's the biggest your head is ever going to be." And then 10 seconds later,
but wait, there's more, right?
My solo photo came up. I snapped it and I said, "You spoke too soon."
By the way, that is also a company choice to do that.
Yes.
Typically, it's just a big group shot. You've got everybody clapping, the confetti coming down. That's it, right? At least as I've experienced it.
Yeah.
And then at Krispy Kreme, the investor relations leader coordinated in a way, I'm sure, with the leadership team that it was not only, okay, let's get all the groups together and subgroups, but as individuals, get up there.
Yes.
That's huge. And that's recognition and inclusiveness. Again,
Yes.
inclusivity in practice, in
Yes.
action. It's pretty
Absolutely.
amazing. So that it's just a fun memory because I remember you were joining and then here we were. And it was just, again, a great example of the joy
Yes.
that is Krispy Kreme. I know we've only got a few minutes left, and I always love asking this question because this is a culture cast,
Yep.
and we've been talking about all things Krispy Kreme culture. But I also want to talk about pop culture and
Okay.
like your take. So, what are you loving these days? And what I mean by that, I want you to talk about Paris too, Paris Krispy Kreme. But so I want you to just mention that, which is also, I've seen the pictures. I wish I was there. The Krispy Kreme opening, the first one ever in Paris.
Yes.
Um, let's talk about that. And then things that you love, like what are you reading these days and or listening to and or watching? Um, what are you wearing? You know, and what's like kind of your favorite thing to do?
Well, so I'll let me just touch on Krispy Kreme Paris.
Yes.
Amazing store, amazing leadership. Um, we went there. I think it was like our second night that we were in Paris. So I took my family. So my husband and I, we have two boys. We took them on a family vacation to Paris and Rome over New Year's. So we did. We were on the Champs Elysees for New Year's Eve.
Nice.
Oh my God, what an experience! But just it was really awesome to see the Krispy Kreme experience carrying out in a brand new country, right?
And
Um,
donuts of all things in Paris.
yes, right. I mean, you're competing with the
Right.
croissant, right?
Right.
I mean, and you should have seen the advertisements in the subway. Right there were just, I mean, they had billboards in the subways, and one it looked like they took a bite out of the donut that made it look like a croissant, and it was like I think I'm paraphrasing here, but the translation is like croissant, we're coming for you, or something like that.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
just it was
croissant. We are coming for you.
right. The wait was an hour and a half long.
Yeah, I read too, like, of course, in all the press when it opened, a mile long.
Yep.
Literally, the line was a mile long.
Yes.
Or how
and
many
and it
kilometers in a
and
mile? Yeah.
it was still, I mean, so what we were there on, so it opened on the 5th of December. We were there on the 28th, 29th. I think that's the day that we were there. And the line was still an hour and a half long to get into the store to be able to buy donuts. It was impressive. What in pop culture?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Bridgerton. Um,
Okay.
so actually so normally when I'm home, my husband plays the white noise
Yeah.
music. It's normally thunderstorm, and it was too quiet in the hotel room. And so it was so I put on the Bridgerton soundtrack
Oh, okay.
on Spotify.
Nice.
Because it's like it's that mix of classical music
Yeah.
but pop. Right, if you're fans of Bridgerton or not, if you listen to the music, you can actually the classical version of pop songs
Yeah.
that are being played. Um, I I've been doing a lot of reading. So I mentioned the book by Lily Zhang, Reconstructing
Okay.
DEI. It's really not a book; it's a workbook. It's a book that is making you go through exercises and really challenging to your core of who you are as an individual and as a DEI practitioner. I'm posting my own learnings as
Oh,
I'm going
okay.
through. So there's two or three posts now that
Oh, I'll
I've
go
made
check that out.
on
Okay.
LinkedIn, and so I'm going to be doing that along the way because I feel like it's a way for me to share and help others
Yeah.
learn themselves. Um, I, you know, I will always turn on a good Madonna song.
Yes.
Lady Gaga. I what am
Modern
I
day
wearing?
Madonna.
This is a combination of Duluth Trading Post, Cabela's, You know,
Oh,
I'm
still a farmer.
still a farmer.
Yeah,
Still a farmer
at root. Wow.
at root. If I wasn't in my job that I'm doing now, uh, I would be working a farm.
Oh my gosh.
That's like my
And
dream is to get back to that.
but I think you'll probably end up landing a farm with your husband and figuring that out for whatever that next chapter is at some point.
Yes.
But I'm realizing we're at the top of the hour. How can people get a hold of you, Christopher? What is the best way?
LinkedIn is the
Okay.
best way. You know, find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with folks. There is going to be the easiest
Okay.
way. And we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I think your full last name is also on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah,
Bylone
so
Van Sandwyk. Yeah, right?
yep. Yep. Christopher Bylone von Sandwyk.
Okay, Von Sandwyk. So that's how you can find Christopher.
Yes.
I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining the 250 plus people who are your fan club, which is amazing. And I'm actually going to close with we've got a couple of interesting culture casts coming up next month, which I can say more about when I can. I guess that's what I'm going to say. Um,
That's
there's a
intriguing.
massive event, which I think you are going to be part of, which we'll talk about later next month in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
So that's will be kind of the next site of my culture casts. And I'll just have one cultural comment I want to make. What I'm reading or what I've read lately is this book called Form Your Own Pack,
Oh,
which is what a forgotten Japanese model teaches about the power of cooperation by Michael Devillano, who also happens to be my husband. So if you haven't picked this up yet, here's the book. And especially for all of us who are around creating cultures of thriving, imagine what cooperation does,
yes.
right? And when you co-create with functions across the organization, companies with companies, and what outcomes you can create. So pick that up, Form Your Own Pack by Michael Devillano. And thank you so much, Christopher. I
Thank
really
you.
do heart you. I love that we've been able to talk about how the vision, I guess, for Krispy Kreme is to become the most loved sweet treat brand in the
Yep.
world. I hope you all feel that too.
Yes.
And until next time, Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
Good to
New
see
Year.
you. The outro,
I know.
right? There's all sorts of comments. There's
I
Ramona,
know.
right? We've got to read them afterwards.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh, they look. Wow. There's like a lot of them. That's cool.
Yeah.